Ever felt that pull towards something more? Something that truly lasts beyond the everyday rush? Like a deep yearning for connection that doesn't fade? Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we sift through the noise of information to bring you the core insights, tailored just for you.
Today we're embarking on a journey into the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. Think of it as a first-hand account, really, of the teachings of a remarkable 19th century Indian mystic.
Hmm.
Our focus, well, it's about how pure love and selfless service become these powerful pathways to a kind of spiritual immortality.
What's so unique, I think, is that these aren't just abstract philosophies, are they? This entire record giving us such intimate access to Ramakrishna's life and thoughts comes from the meticulous notes of one of his disciples.
Right, just known as M. Mahendranath Gupta, a really devoted follower, apparently with an incredible memory. He captured the nuances of Ramakrishna's daily interactions, which is just fascinating. Now, it's true that some of the cultural and religious references might feel a little outside the usual for some listeners. The world Sri Ramakrishna lived and taught in was distinctly Indian, you know?
Sure, context is important.
But the deeper you go, you'll find that the heart of his message, that mystical core, it really speaks to something fundamentally human and universal.
So our mission today is to really understand how Ramakrishna's teachings position selfless service, done with a completely pure intention, as, well, the ultimate form of devotion. We'll also explore how this aligns with the spirit of Bhakti Yoga, which is the path of devotion, and Karma Yoga, the path of selfless action.
Mm.
Okay, let's dive in.
Okay, so to really appreciate Ramakrishna's emphasis on pure love and selfless service, a little context about his early life is probably helpful. He arrived at the Dakshineswar temple garden with his brother Ramkumar, who became the temple priest.
Right.
And initially, Ramakrishna actually had reservations about serving Rani Rasmani, the temple founder, because she was of a Shudra caste.
No, interesting. So a conflict there.
Yeah, it went against the traditional Brahminical beliefs he'd grown up with, very influenced by his father. And this early conflict, I think it highlights a crucial insight. Even really deeply ingrained social conditioning, well, it can be challenged and overcome by a profound spiritual yearning and direct experience.
But the atmosphere of the temple garden itself.
Yeah.
You mentioned the quiet spaces, the respect he got from Rani Rasmani and her son-in-law, Mathur.
Exactly.
And crucially, that powerful presence he felt of the divine Mother Kali in the temple. That started to change things.
It began to transform him, absolutely. His intense longing for a direct personal vision of the Mother of the Universe, well, it became his entire focus, his whole world, really.
Wow.
He would immerse himself in hours of deep meditation in the secluded area north of the temple, a place others apparently even avoided.
So really seeking solitude.
Totally. And he let go of ritualistic formalities, even discarding his sacred thread during meditation,
Why was that?
as a way to shed ego, basically. To shed societal constraints when he was focused purely on the divine. His yearning was described as being so intense, like the desperate cry of a child separated from its mother.
That's powerful imagery. And these weren't just calm, quiet meditations, were they?
Not at all. He experienced incredibly powerful emotional states, weeping uncontrollably sometimes, even questioning the reality of the divine, asking, are you real, Mother? Or is this all just like a story?
That sounds almost like doubt or desperation.
Yeah, a real spiritual anguish. And there were even attempts by Mathur and Rani Rasmani to treat what they thought was some kind of illness, some mental imbalance.
Ah, they didn't understand.
Right. But Ramakrishna's experiences were clearly on a completely different level. He'd see the Divine Mother in the women they sent to him, for instance,
Really?
and would often just enter samadhi, that state of profound spiritual absorption.
Okay, so here's where it gets really interesting. You mentioned this difference between just knowing things intellectually and actually experiencing them.
Yes, exactly. That's a key distinction in his journey. His cousin Haladhari, for example, was apparently incredibly knowledgeable about scripture, very learned.
Right.
But Ramakrishna's realizations, they came from his own deep, direct, intimate encounters with the divine. It wasn't theoretical for him.
And this led to some extraordinary states.
Absolutely. He went through a period of intense identification with Radha, who is Krishna's beloved consort in Hindu tradition.
Okay.
And this identification led him to experience what's known as Mahabhava, which you could think of as the absolute peak, the culmination of ecstatic divine love.
Wow.
And he even had a vision, a direct experience of Krishna himself merging into him, becoming one with his very being.
Hard to even imagine.
Exactly.
So after reaching states like that, what happens to the sense of self?
Well, the idea is that when someone reaches such profound spiritual heights, the sense of a separate I and mine, it just dissolves, it fades away.
The ego diminishes.
Exactly. The body is then seen as simply a temporary vessel, a sheath. And there's this transcendence of past worries, present concerns, future anxieties, and a deep sense of equanimity, sort of an evenness of mind when facing life's ups and downs, pleasure, pain, all that duality.
Right.
The text mentions something interesting, too, that only those with a specific divine purpose, a special mission, can actually return from the very deepest states of samadhi to interact with the world for the benefit of others.
Ah, so it's not just about personal liberation then. There's a return.
For some, yes, it seems so.
Okay.
Then we encounter Totapuri.
Right, the wandering monk.
Exactly. He initiated Ramakrishna into the teachings of Advaita Vedanta.
And Advaita Vedanta emphasizes what exactly?
The ultimate reality of Brahman, this one, indivisible consciousness that underlies everything. And the idea that the world as we perceive it, with all its separateness and multiplicity, is a kind of illusion. It's called Maya.
Okay, illusion. That sounds like a big shift from devotion to a personal deity like Kali.
It was. And even for Ramakrishna, who was so intensely, deeply devoted to the Divine Mother Kali, this shift in perspective wasn't instant. It wasn't easy.
Really?
Yeah, he initially found it impossible, apparently, to pull his mind away from her radiant form during meditation, as Totapuri instructed.
That really shows the power of his bhakti, his devotion.
It absolutely does. But it also illustrates a key Vedantic principle he eventually grasped, that Maya, this power that creates the illusion of separateness, isn't something apart from Brahman.
How so?
Well, the analogy uses like the power to burn is inseparable from fire itself. Maya is seen as the inherent power of Brahman, so they're ultimately one and the same, in a way.
Okay, I think I get that. It's not separate. It's the power of the reality.
Precisely.
So we see these incredibly intense personal experiences, these profound states of realization. How do these then lead him to place such a strong emphasis on selfless service? That seems like a shift back towards the world, in a sense.
Well, that's a great question. Sri Ramakrishna came to realize he felt it was the Divine Mother's wish, actually, for him to establish a new order, a community.
Okay.
A community that would uphold the universal truths he had experienced so directly. And he made this really interesting distinction between what he called the ripe ego and the unripe ego.
Ripe and unripe ego. Tell me more about that.
Okay, so the unripe ego, that's the ordinary ego, the one that keeps us bound to selfish desires, attachments, thinking I and mine all the time.
Got it. The everyday ego.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
But the ripe ego, he said, is different. Think of like the ego of knowledge in a dedicated teacher who shares wisdom freely, or the ego of devotion in a fervent devotee who lives for God, or the innocent ego of a child. Or, importantly, the humble ego of a servant who just wants to serve.
Ah, the ego of a servant.
Yes, this ripe ego, he taught, allows one to act in the world, to function, but without attachment to personal gain or recognition. It's about being a vehicle, an instrument for a higher purpose, not about self-glorification.
That makes sense. It's like the ego is still there, but transformed, reoriented.
Exactly. It's purified, dedicated.
And the book gives examples of his compassion that stem from this, right?
Oh, absolutely. Really touching examples. The story of his nephew Akshay's death is particularly moving.
What happened there?
Well, initially, when Akshay died, Ramakrishna observed the death with a certain sense of spiritual detachment, seeing the soul leave the body.
Okay.
But the very next day, he was just overcome with profound grief, weeping for Akshay. And he saw this, interestingly, as the Divine Mother teaching him directly the depth of worldly suffering that ordinary people experience when they lose someone.
Wow. So his heart wasn't hardened by spiritual experiences.
Quite the opposite. It seems it was actually opened wider, made more sensitive to the suffering of others. He felt their pain.
That's incredible. And what about his interactions with people from other faiths?
Well, his interactions with leaders and devotees from various religious backgrounds, Christian, Muslim, different Hindu sects, also led him to this powerful understanding, the underlying unity of all faiths.
The famous analogy.
Yes, the beautiful analogy of a lake with different ghats, the steps leading down to the water.
Right.
People from different backgrounds might stand at different ghats, use different cups, and call the water by different names. Hindus calling it jal, Muslims calling it pani, Christians calling it water.
But it's all the same water.
Exactly. It powerfully illustrates that while the paths, the rituals, the names might differ, the ultimate reality, the goal, God, is one and the same.
That's a really enduring message. So what are the key implications for us for how we live?
Well, it sounds like even though Ramakrishna had these profound Advaitic experiences of oneness, that non-dual reality,
Yeah.
he also held onto and deeply valued bhakti, that loving devotion. He didn't discard it.
Right. It wasn't an either thing for him.
Not at all.
Yeah.
He famously used the analogy of wanting to taste sugar, not become sugar.
Taste sugar, not become sugar. Explain that.
It explains the devotee's desire for a loving relationship with God, a connection, rather than a complete merging where all sense of individuality is lost forever. The devotee wants to enjoy that relationship, that sweetness.
I see. So maintaining a little separation allows for that love relationship.
Precisely. And this idea of having the ego of a servant, seeing oneself as a willing instrument of the divine, that became a very important aspect of his teachings. And maybe, a more accessible path for many people than striving for complete dissolution right away.
Surrender and service.
Yes. And pure love, priyama, and devotion, bhakti, are just constantly highlighted as the essential means to realize God. His conversations with people like Vijay Goswami, a preacher from the Brahma Samaj reform movement, really emphasize this.
And wasn't there a song mentioned?
Yeah, there's mention of a Brahma Samaj song that talks about knowing God through love, which resonated deeply with him.
So love is central. But what about purity? You mentioned purity of heart earlier.
Absolutely crucial. He stressed that purity of heart is essential. And this purity, he taught, comes partly from detaching ourselves from woman in gold.
We've symbolized.
Worldly attachments, sensual desires, greed, the pursuit of wealth and status, basically, the things that distract the mind from God.
Okay. Detachment.
And also through genuine repentance, symbolized by shedding tears, not just tears of sadness, but tears of remorse for past mistakes and intense longing for the divine.
Tears washing the heart clean.
Exactly. He used another vivid analogy, the muddy needle and the magnet.
How does that go?
A needle covered in thick mud won't be attracted to a magnet, right? Can't respond.
Makes sense.
Similarly, he said, our hearts, clouded by worldly attachments and impurities, cannot be drawn effectively to God, the great magnet, until those impurities are washed away, often by the tears of devotion and repentance.
That's a powerful image. And this connects directly to karma yoga, doesn't it? The selfless service aspect.
Precisely. Acting without being attached to the outcome, to the fruits of your actions.
How did he put it?
Ramakrishna often spoke of seeing himself as just a mere instrument in the hands of the Divine Mother. He'd say things like, I am the machine, and thou, O Lord, art the operator.
I am the machine, thou art the operator.
Yes. And that is the very essence of karma yoga, performing actions not for your own personal gain, not for recognition or reward, but as a selfless offering, dedicated to the divine will, doing your duty because it's your duty or because it serves God or humanity.
So the book must offer glimpses of this unconditional service in action, right?
Huh?
Even if it's not always explicitly labeled that way.
Oh, definitely. You see it woven throughout his interactions. For instance, his deep yearning for his own close devotees to come to him. It wasn't just wanting company. It shows this profound, almost motherly care for their spiritual well-being.
Like his relationship with Rakal.
Exactly, whom he saw and treated as his spiritual son. The book is filled with moments where he demonstrates just deep care and understanding for his devotees' struggles, their doubts, their progress. These weren't just casual chats. They were filled with genuine concern and guidance.
It wasn't just high philosophy, it was personal connection.
Very much so. And even in seemingly small interactions, you can see this underlying emphasis on serving others. There's this other analogy he shared
Go on.
about living in the world like an unchaste woman.
Okay. That sounds provocative.
It is, but the point is this. Outwardly, such a woman might fulfill all her household duties meticulously, taking care of everything. But inwardly, her mind is completely focused on her secret beloved, her paramour.
Ah, I see. So the analogy is about inner focus despite outer action.
Precisely. It's a powerful metaphor for performing our daily tasks, our worldly duties, with diligence and care, but with our inner attention, our heart's love, constantly directed towards God. It implies selfless action combined with inner detachment.
Doing what needs to be done, but keeping the mind fixed on the real goal.
Exactly. Doing it with love and dedication, but without being caught up in the results or the ego gratification, because your true focus is elsewhere, on the divine.
So pulling this all together, according to Ramakrishna, what's the ultimate impact, the ultimate goal of living a life guided by this pure love and this kind of selfless service?
Well, fundamentally, it's about transcending the limitations of our small, separate ego. It's about realizing our true nature, which is inherently connected to, or even one with, the divine.
And this realization, this union, That's where the idea of spiritual immortality comes in.
Yes, that's how you can understand it. It's a form of spiritual immortality, maybe not always in a literal physical sense of living forever, but in terms of transcending the cycle of birth and death, the limitations of finite existence, through union with the eternal, timeless reality.
Becoming one with that which doesn't die.
In essence, yes. And there's another aspect, too. By living in the hearts of others through this kind of divine love and selfless action, you leave this lasting positive impact on the world, a kind of legacy of love that continues to resonate long after your physical body is gone, even if it's not always outwardly acknowledged or celebrated in a big way.
It's a way of becoming truly unforgettable, but in the most meaningful sense, through connection and service.
Beautifully put, yes. And as we touched on earlier, his teachings did directly inspire the founding of the Ramakrishna order, a community of monks and lay devotees who continue to share his universal message of harmony, love, devotion, and selfless service all over the world.
So as we bring this together, this deep dive into the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna really reveals that pure love and selfless service, as he taught and lived them, they aren't just, lofty idealistic concepts.
No, not at all.
They're presented as powerful, practical pathways to spiritual realization and to living a life that feels deeply connected to something greater than ourselves.
Absolutely. Serving others with pure heart, seeing yourself as an instrument of a larger divine will, this is presented as really the highest expression of devotion. And it beautifully aligns, as we've seen, with the core principles of both Bhakti Yoga, the path of love, and Karma Yoga, the path of action. Ultimately, you could say it's about achieving that spiritual immortality, perhaps, by living in the hearts of others through the transformative power of divine love.
And that leaves us, and you listening, with this to consider. How can you perhaps bring more acts of selfless service, motivated by genuine care, by pure love, into your own life? Could this idea of living in others' hearts through divine love offer you a new perspective, maybe, on your own impact and your own spiritual growth? Something to think about.
Definitely food for thought. We encourage you to continue your own exploration of these profound ideas, maybe even dip into the gospel itself and reflect on the transformative potential of selfless love in your own journey.